everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday Windup. My name is Brian. This is Tim, and thank you guys for logging on. We've got a great show today. Just want to say glad to be back. I've been gone for 2 weeks, so feeling good to be back in the saddle with my man Tim over here. I think we've got a great show planned. So to start us off, before I forget, guys, if you haven't already downloaded our Watchbox app, please do so. You can find it on Android and iOS at Watchbox app by Golfberg. And it is the best collector's toolbox to store your collection, see watch news, and get very relevant and up-to-date pricing data on all pre-owned watches. And I really appreciate all the feedback that you guys give to myself and Tim and the rest of our team, because we are actively updating the app and putting in all of the bugs and tweaks and things that you guys find, so we really appreciate that.
Yeah, you guys have been like our super beta testers, and we thank you. That's why if you tune into our Watches Live program every Tuesday, we give you stuff as thanks. All right, Brian, let's launch into the topics.
So we're going to launch in right now to this or that, and today we have two amazing watches, two watches that I am a big fan of. They are the Patek 5170G, or to start us, and the Patek 5070G. So on the screen you'll see the 5070G first, followed by the 5170G. Tim, why don't you start us off and tell me what your this or that is?
Okay, well, this is an easy choice for me, guys. I'm not into the cult of the in-house movement, and I love old and anachronistic things. And for me, the 5070G is just more that. So right here you can see a watch that is, in so many ways, everything that's great about Patek Philippe in the second half of the 20th century. Now, it's known principally as a watch of the 2000s, but it came out in '98. And it traces its style roots back even farther, inspired by the oversized reference 2512 in the museum. It's really an aviator-style dial with the tachymetric scale serving a double purpose. The first is to give it that historical inflection. The second is to give it, well, frankly, a little bit of a buffer to disguise the size of the movement in relation to the 42mm case. The same reason is in evidence in the double Gadron bezel of the watch, which is stepped so as to once again allow for a large watch without aesthetic inconvenience. Now, the watch is beautiful in every sense. Functionally, when you start the chronograph, it's got that tactile pleasure of a traditional column wheel, a robustly constructed, hand-finished movement, hand-tuned movement, and of course, this is the evocative Lemania base. Now, the base is known as the Lemania 2310. In Patek service, it's known as the CH2770, based on its size and its thickness. Now, it's gorgeous. That balances almost a third of the movement wide. It does have ties to the original caliber that went to the moon, the Omega 321, also based on the Lemania Abauche, but this one is finer. Geneva hallmark in the old-fashioned style. You can see those gorgeous Côte de Genève across the bridges, engine-turned perlage across the base, everything to a mirror shine or a rich grained texture. Again, if you like it old school, and I do, this isn't even a battle. Okay, so Brian, do you want to go with the 5170?
So I am actually going to go with the 5070 as well, but seeing as how there's very little left for me to say about this watch, since you did such a good job, I'll highlight what I like about it. So in full agreement, I'm a big fan of the aviator style of the watch. I like that it was oversized. When a watch originally came out in 1998 in yellow gold with a black dial, yes, it was considered very large at the time. And they were sort of going against the grain. And interestingly enough, the watch wasn't that big a hit in the very beginning. Not nearly as big a hit as it's become since its original release. So I too, don't really care as much about the movement itself. I'm okay that it's a Lemania-based movement. It's a workhorse movement. They work incredibly well.
Yeah, and put it this way, this is not what you're going to find in an old Omega Speedmaster. This is very much its own thing. It's all Patek.
Exactly, and I like the balance of the dial. Inversely, the 5170G, I think we can all agree, is probably a better movement in general.
Yes.
But it's definitely a more elegant watch. You've got the pulsation dial there, which is designed for a doctor in order to, figure out, the pulse of the patient, which is why that's there. This iteration, it was on the 5170J, which was the first iteration of the watch, carried over to this version of the watch, and then they haven't put it on since. So with the black dial and the rose gold, they took off the pulsation part of the dial.
It is true that the standard 5170 is a bit spare about its dial because there's less of a disparity between movement size and case size. The 5070 being 42, this one is 39.4. So that pulsation scale does humanize it a little bit, give it a little bit of additional art and architecture about it. Now you also know that the registers are actually below the cannon pinion at center. That's also a little bit of a, I would say, aesthetic twist relative to the 5070. Not better, not worse, just different. And likewise, if you turn the watch over, it's not necessarily better or worse, just different. But what I really love about this particular watch is the snail and cam system used for the minute jumper. It is an instantaneous minute jump. It does have a modern 4 Hertz beat rate, or 28.8, and it does have, I would say, perhaps a more intricate architecture to it, because it does pack that case, that 39.4 millimeter case. I would also say that with a 65-hour power reserve as a manual wind companion, it's a little bit more practical. You can put it down for a day or so, not have to reset.
So real quick, folks in the chat are saying that there's something going on with the audio. Not really sure, but if the technical team wants to take a look at that behind the wall, guys, please do so, so that we can get everything back up to proper quality. A little bit more about this particular 5070 though. This actually has some pretty cool provenance to it. This was a watch that just came into my hands recently. This particular 5070G belonged to Eric Clapton. He purchased it from the Geneva boutique, and on the papers of the watch, it does say to Eric Clapton, and he even signed the papers himself. So very cool provenance, in my opinion. He's a prolific collector. You've seen his watches turn up at auction quite often over the years, particularly that 2499, which brought, I believe, just over $3 million. So beautiful watch, and on top of it, a very cool story behind it. So to me, it's just a knockout winner.
Yes, Eric Clapton, who you may have heard of as a guy who covered Bob Marley.
Tim, they said that the mic is rubbing your chest when you move.
Yes. Okay, guys.
I don't know how we can avoid that.
No soup for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But no, both great watches. And again, both watches, the 5170 is available in our pre-owned department on our website. The 5070G we haven't quite posted yet, sort of just getting a lay of the land on that bad boy. So trying to really gauge the playing field, see if this is the kind of piece that should go at auction or what the story is.
Take this one home, guys. It's a big trophy.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree, Eric. Nothing beats Clapton for cool. And again, he's probably one of the more well-known Patek collectors, I think, of the modern era.
Yeah, and someday he might even be as good as Buck Durham at playing the guitar. Blue Oyster Cult, I got your back.
But no, so we have a great show for you guys tonight. I was actually in Switzerland for, I just got back this past week, but I was gone for about 8 days touring around Neuchâtel and Geneva, seeing a lot of the manufacturers that we work with, had a lot of great appointments. And just want to go over some of those meetings, sort of present to you guys what's sort of going on behind the scenes in the industry, as well as some other, I think, sensitive topics that people were experiencing online. I've been reading about them on the forums. So to get us started, had a great meeting with George Kearns, the new worldwide CEO of Breitling. Great guy. For those that don't know, he just moved over from being the CEO of Richemont. And since day one, he's really been turning things around on their head over there. So sat down with him, and I think there's a lot of good things to come from Breitling. He said that over the next 24 months, there's going to be completely new product lines rolled out, and that anywhere from 60 to 80% of the current product lines are going to be revamped, if not replaced. So I think that you're going to see a big push coming from the brand and a big turnaround. And I think that it's primed to do it. I think that Breitling has a lot of history. They have a lot of models in their archives that they can draw from. I think that it's a price point that really speaks to a lot of customers in that $2,000 to $10,000 price point. And with just a little bit of magic, I think that it's a brand that you can really see skyrocket again, similar to the way that Omega did.
Yes, I think you got to connect the dots here. First of all, guys, we're going to do the wrist check. I hear you loud and clear from the chat. and we're going to get to that. But you have to connect the dots, and the dots really start in 1996 here, because before he was one of the longest tenured Richemont CEOs, Georges Kern was part of the IPO team that led Tag Heuer to its initial offering in 1996, and everyone involved in that project made a lot of money. Now here's the other thing. When CVC Capital Partners purchased the controlling stake in Breitling earlier this year, Teddy Schneider, who's the son of Ernst Schneider, who saved the brand and rebuilt it, actually reinvested some of his money into the company. Now, I don't see Georges Kern doing this because he gets to call himself the chieftain of Breitling, and I don't see the Schneider family buying back in unless there's some sort of expanded equity or IPO option down the road. I don't have any privileged knowledge. I wasn't part of those discussions, but I think if you connect the dots, the reason that people want to buy back into something when they've already gotten hundreds of millions of Swiss francs payout in the case of the Schneider family, or in the case of Georges Kern, we're about to be elected to the Richemont board of directors. The only reason you go back in with Breitling, if you're those people, is if you're going to get equity for an IPO down the street, and that's exactly down the road. That's exactly what Georges Kern, in my opinion, has been brought in to do because he's done it before.
And from the chat, Philip mentioned the Breitling Top Time. To me, that would be a prime lineup of watches that they can draw inspiration from. I think that the bicolor dials, the colors that are there, are extremely prevalent now. I think that they can speak to really good price points. They had some yellow gold pieces, stainless steel, lots of different case shapes. We were throwing around in the office. Tell me your thoughts, Tim. I wouldn't do like a gold plating, but if they did a gold cap on a watch and they offered it a really good price point, I feel like it could be a really cool piece. If you could do a gold cap Breitling Top Time and call it the $3,000 to $5,000 price point, I think it's a cool watch to have.
I'm not sure how I feel about gold cap, guys. If you're not familiar with gold cap, this is something that Rolex famously did right through the 1980s. A base metal watch with a very thick cap, basically a large piece of foil wrapped around the top of the watch. Turn it over, you can see what the base metal is. But thicker than plating, it's not rolled gold, it's literally a gold cap. And I'm not sure if that helps them, just because a lot of people don't know the difference between capped and plated has a bad reputation.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think that plated always had a bad reputation because it came across as people having to buy a not all gold watch. But I think now more than ever, price points are sensitive, and that with where the price of gold watches have gone, if you can get a really cool watch with that look from a brand that's coming out with new and exciting product, I mean, me personally, I'd wear it. So
it could be interesting. I would also say if you're going to go the gold route and you want to cut the price, hey guys, 14 karat is still a thing.
Do it. I definitely agree. I don't think that 18 has been here for a long time, and I think that you can go back to 14 definitely. And it's a stronger metal. It won't scratch as easily, and it's probably more durable.
And that might be the best of both worlds. You get a solid gold watch, legitimately, and you get something vintage inspired.
Answering Thumper JDM real quick, I definitely think yellow gold is making a return. Really depends on the brand. You still have most Richemont brands aren't really doing much in yellow. Rolex, of course, it never left. Patek, it never left. AP has, a few years back, started introducing it back to the line sparingly. They do it in extremely limited quantities. For the most part, they're boutique only, and you really don't see that many of them. But I think that yellow gold is definitely coming back.
I believe it is, and I think some of the real classicists in the industry never gave it up. Vacheron, for instance, never gave it up. As Brian said, Patek and Rolex. The question ultimately becomes, what does that 30 to 40 age bracket, your group that's coming into its own, approaching its peak earning years, but definitely is a different generation than the baby boomers and even than Gen X. Are they into two-tone? Are they into yellow gold? Because right now, signs point to yes, to quote the 8-Ball.
I agree. Moving on. So next, the next one of the more exciting dinners for me that I had while I was away was I had a dinner with myself, my dad, Thierry Stern, and Jerome Pernici, who's the International Sales Director of Patek, just the four of us. And it was an awesome meal, great conversation. One of the big topics at the meal, which was really interesting, was Mr. Stern wants to educate the world on the artistic crafts, specifically those that were presented at the Grand Exhibition that they had in New York, as well as amongst their collection of the other pieces that they make. And he really thinks that, as a whole, that you know, the way that people view the art of these rare handcrafts is much more focused on the brand itself and then the art. But he really wants to bring it into focus just how unique these pieces are, just how rare they are, and just how hard it is to actually produce these pieces of art. And we spoke back and forth about the pocket watch, for example, that you guys just saw was done by Anita Porcher, who is one of the best enamelers in the world.
And I think so is the 5531.
And the 5531 is as well. So these are amazing pieces of work, and it really came back to, as one of the best enamelers in the world, if she was a contemporary artist or anything else that was out in the mainstream, you know, her pieces would be selling for millions and millions of dollars. But you know, it really comes down to education and educating you know, the watch consumers as a whole, and even not just watch consumers, but collectors of art, just how rare these pieces are and just how hard it is to do, and just how few individuals there are in the world that can do it of this quality.
I do think that there is an increasing recognition of this because it can't be mechanized. Now we see luxury watches with silicon photo-etched parts being pumped out, and they can't be hand-finished. We see machine-made luxury watches. Anita Porcher has definitely been recognized. She's gone from doing freelance work for companies all over the industry for a long time. She was the semi-official enameler at jaeger-lecoultre, and now I believe she's pretty much exclusive to Patek. So that 992 pocket watch you're seeing is part of a whole family of métier d'art watches that were built and decorated specifically for the New York exhibition. You've seen the wristwatches. You know, you've seen the 5230 New York, the 5531 World Time Minute Repeater. What you didn't see unless you went to the exhibition was that they had a whole display set of vitrines of pocket watches and series 20,000 clocks. Yes, Patek still makes clocks that were just canvas for marquetry, the setting of principally woods of different colors and textures and shapes, almost to create a puzzle piece work of art. Gem setting, engraving, enameling, miniature painting, and many of the works that were on exhibition were half finished and were being completed during the course of the exhibition for sale to New York.
It's the first time that they've ever taken the artists outside of Geneva in France, where they work, and bring them to meet the people. And they said that the greatest reaction that they had from people for the whole exhibition was meeting these artists and just seeing how difficult it was to make these pieces. And to answer Eric from the chat, Mr. Stern is extremely humble and down to earth. And again, like, you leave the meal just thinking like this is the person who 100% should be leading Patek Philippe and stands for everything that they stand for.
Yes. And I would also say that if you really want to appreciate everything that was there and everything that was on exhibition, go look at photo essays of the show, because you can't get a full sense of what was on display and the extent of the artistry unless you actually look at the pieces that were created just for the show. Not the series wristwatches, basically the piece-unique clocks and pocket watches.
They're amazing. So definitely take a look online. A lot of the various watch blogs have videos and photos of the pieces, and I highly recommend taking a look.
Neuro, I believe it was 2006. I think 2006 was the Patek switch over to gray gold, if that's the question there.
Moving on. Okay. So a little bit of tidbit. This is something that I've been reading a lot about on the forums, and I think that is a good topic to discuss and bring up. And the information's sort of out there, so I think that a lot of other retailers are probably expressing the same thing that we are, but Rolex has announced a slowing of product shipment to their retailers going into the fourth quarter. This is something that Rolex does every year, but they're actually doing it a little bit sooner than they normally would have. And you've seen a tightening of product across the spectrum, mostly sport models, Hulks, Batmans, and of course Daytonas. And even while in Switzerland, I saw none of these in showcases. And I think that you're seeing a lack of this product worldwide. And you're also seeing an escalation in the pre-owned market of these watches. If you go online now, we're seeing pre-owned Batman selling for at least $1,000 over retail, and we're seeing Hulks selling for at least $1,000 over retail. And these were watches that anywhere from 3 to 6 months ago, while full retail watches were somewhat attainable at your retailer. You would see, you know, Batmans if you wanted one. Hulks you would actually see in the showcase, and now they're gone. And I think you're seeing not necessarily a constriction of the market for people that are buying watches, but I think that people in general are now focusing on a select number of pieces from a select number of brands, and the watches are disappearing. You know, I know that shipments on these watches now have all but stopped. And if you think that $1,000 or so over list now on these watches pre-owned is a lot, wait till 30 days from now when there are even less of them in the market. What's going to happen?
Yeah, now, Rolex in the past has been compared to either the U.S. Federal Reserve or De Beers. I don't love the De Beers comparison for a number of reasons, so consider the Fed. Just as the Fed can do a number of things, from raising reserve requirements, buying bonds, selling bonds, they can do a number of things to firm up or soften interest rates. Now, the thing is, Rolex does the same thing, and they have 3 principal tools to tighten up margins. They can raise prices, which you can't do constantly. That's a bullet you can fire occasionally. They can slow shipment of inventory, as Brian's detailed, and they can open and close doors. And they tend to alternate between those 3 options to firm up or soften the market as necessary to maintain consistency. They're never going to get too high or too low. Right now, slower deliveries is their tool of choice.
And what a lot of people might not realize is that Rolex actually does not have an owner. Rolex is actually owned and controlled by a trust. And you know, as much as they are for profit, you know, they're able to make decisions like the slowing down of product or tightening up releases in order to increase demand, and they're really answering to nobody but themselves. You know, what we're paying now for those 2 references in particular is more than we've ever paid before. Batman's, for example, you know, for complete versions with the box and papers, we're paying $8,000. We're paying $8,000 for Hulks. And you know, when you think about a watch retailing for $8,950 and we're paying $8,000 now to buy them pre-owned, I mean, it's crazy what's happening. Same thing on the Hulk, $9,050 retail, we're paying $8,000. You're seeing over the last 30 to 60 days, it's steadily going up and up and up, and it'll be very interesting to see where the ceiling is.
What I'd like to know, because one thing all those have in common is steel. What kind of response are we seeing to the yellow gold ceramic Daytonas on a strap on the Oyster Flex?
So, interestingly enough, crazy demand on those, and Rolex is also keeping those tight right now. We've seen very few come in. I would say less than 2 or 3 thus far. You're seeing really good growth on the model, a model that on a strap had all but been dead, and they change up a strap and boom, they're off to the races. One thing that people don't realize is when you go to Rolex's website, you only see 1 dial of each, but they actually make multiple dials for each watch. And we keep getting phone calls from people like, hey, did Rolex make the new yellow gold Daytona with a black dial and yellow subs? I don't see it on the website. Is this an older version of the watch that they put an Oyster Flex on? And no, Rolex actually is making that watch and quite a few other dials for the gold ceramic pieces.
And it should be mentioned that this was a real test case. We talk about yellow gold coming back. It doesn't get much more definitive than a resurrection of yellow gold on an iconic Rolex reference that generally sells well in steel. Cosmograph Daytona, yellow gold, Oyster Flex strap, big hit, and that bodes well not just for, I think, yellow gold, but for the market as a whole, because collectors finally have an appetite for big prices, for big pieces, if the design is right and the brand has integrity.
Exactly, and pointing out Adam Brown with the Sky Dweller blue dial, again, just another line that Rolex is doing that the watches are near impossible to get. So you've got the stainless steel Sky Dweller, the stainless steel Daytonas, you've got the gold Daytonas, you've got the Batmans, the Hulks. Even the rhodium dial Yachtmasters now are getting harder to come by. Steel subs, GMT Master 2s. These are all watches that if you want to buy one, I would really recommend getting one now. I think that you're going to see them become far more scarce than they already are. And yeah, and again, for those that are viewing this or whatnot, if you have one that you're not wearing and you want to trade in, now's also the time to trade one in or sell it, because I think that you're going to be approaching a peak of what these watches are worth.
And if you're weird like me, you still love the Daytona Beach Daytona in white gold with chrysoprase green dial. We'll have one someday, and I'll make it mine.
It's all yours, Timmy.
Probably is.
Moving on. So
let's do wrist checks, because
okay,
we got a
fine.
request
we
for
see
that
a lot
early.
of wrist checks.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've got my trusted piece today. I am wearing a 5980/1A with a blue dial. Really beat the snot out of it. I was actually going to wear a different watch today, but I completely forgot. This piece right here, you know, I'd say it's probably my most prevalent everyday wear. Only thing that gets me is it doesn't have a moving second hand, but I've sort of come to grips with that. And this too is a watch that has seen remarkable not only value retention, but value growth over the past few years. I think in the last 12 months, this watch has gone from being a, let's call it 12 to 18 months, this watch has gone from being a $40,000 watch to a $50,000 to $55,000 watch. And I think that for Nautilus owners all around, everybody is clapping for joy with what the watches are bringing. And for those that are looking for a Nautilus, good luck. I mean, again, I'm sure that you guys are being told that it's few and far between. And it's not just models like the 5711, it's the 5712, it's the 5726, it's the 5990, pretty much all models in the line. And it's now carrying over to Aquanaut models, because those individuals that would have wanted to get a Nautilus now try and get an Aquanaut, and even those are really hard to get. So you see a common thread from these powerhouse brands of, I wouldn't even call it artificial supply and demand, because it's not artificial. There's more demand than there is supply, and they're 100% in control of it. So I think it's calculated scarcity.
Yeah, I think, where did you say that went from? $40,000 to 80, you said?
40 to about 50, 55.
Okay, because I was going to say it went from a buffing wheel to like laser welding, the way you wear it. All right, so what I'm wearing tonight. It's my Duomet. Yep, I'm in a groove with this watch. Loved it for years before it was mine. Now it's mine, and once I put it on, I have trouble taking it off. And I'll be honest, we did a this or that between two Pateks earlier in the show. I'll take this over both of them. Okay, so we got here Eric Clapton. Boom. We got here Tim Masso. Boom. Let's turn them over.
Let's be gentle with that one, bad boy.
Okay, okay. I'm not going to break it. I'm not going to burn it like Jimi Hendrix guitar. Okay. All I'm saying is I'll stick with what I got.
No, the Duomet is absolutely beautiful. That has two barrels, doesn't it?
2 barrels, 2 drivetrains, 2 movements, 1 balance, 1 watch. To me,
I love that they threw a splash of yellow in there.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what a cool quirk of the watch that really gives it like that extra little flair of design. You know, for somewhat of a classic watch, you know, it's got almost like a sporty feel to it.
It does. Well, the white gold is the time, and the colored gold is the chronograph. And yeah, it's one of those watches that kind of sort of looks like it has a face too, so it's got that going for it.
Moving on, well, thank you guys. Those are the wrist shots. Definitely have something new next week. Moving on, price increases. So
yeah.
This is something that I think is always on the consumer's mind. It's always on our minds, and it's always on the minds of the brands. When is the right time to do a price increase? How to relay the message? And is it going to put pie on their face? So there is a price increase coming from Vacheron October 1st, for those that don't know. This is going to be all across the line, and the reason being is fluctuations in currency between the markets. So more often than not, this is generally the reason for price increases, is when you have
when the dollar's getting hammered.
Exactly. Well, either the dollar really strengthens or the dollar really weakens, and you've got a area of the world in which prices are low and everybody flocks there to buy. So you're going to see a price increase from Vacheron October 1st. So if you're interested in buying a new overseas, they're absolutely beautiful. Now would be the time to get one. And I think you're going to see other brands follow suit. I believe Roger Dubuis is having a price increase in the near future. And while not announced, there's always the chance that Panerai and Jaeger-LeCoultre follow suit, given that they're part of the same group. So,
and they also had several price cuts over the last 24 months.
Exactly. So these were brands that had cuts and cuts and cuts in order to get their products within, I think, a price point that they were happy about. But when you have a dollar strengthening and weakening back and forth against the Swiss franc and against the euro, you've got to take matters into your hands, so all the purchases are not flowing one way.
Now, here's a question. Are these global price increases, or are they U.S. market only?
You know what? That is a good question. I believe these are... You know what? That is a good question. I am not 100% sure.
We'll get back to you on that.
We will get back. We will touch on that next week, but for right now, I know that they're U.S. price changes.
I think there's a chance, honestly, with some of the Brexit impact, or at least the fear of a Brexit impact waning, and the dollar taking a pounding, certainly, but also the outlook for the industry as a whole better. Price increases for any reason at this point show optimism.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's a strengthening coming from Asia, which generally means a strengthening from all markets, because a lot of Chinese consumers tend to purchase abroad. And I think that you've seen, if you see a price raise worldwide, especially in the States, that generally means that, again, like you said, that there's an optimistic outlook and they're hoping to sell more units.
And export data backs that up, too.
Exactly. No, and so you've got a rumor mill going. There's been this rumor of a price increase for Rolex coming for a long time now. They're due for a price increase. It's been, I think, years now since they had their last one. They're justified in doing so when you see what the watches are selling for and what they're selling for pre-owned. Again, if they had a 5 to 7% price increase, I don't even think people would care. They're already paying that amount for the watches to begin with. So they haven't announced it yet. I think there's always trepidation, wondering what it's going to do. From the retailer stand of mind in these situations, a price increase is actually good because it increases the value of your inventory. And it's always good, especially if it's going on with a brand that people are going to buy anyway.
So here's a question I have, and I'm sure some in our audience are thinking the same thing. We talked about price increases across markets and how it's not always the case that a price increases in every market when it increases in one. When Rolex, for instance, increases its prices, is it going to say, okay, Hulk, Batman, white gold, stainless steel, Sky Dweller, all your prices are rising, and oh, by the way, we're also going to stick 3% on, a solid gold Yachtmaster? Are they going to increase all prices of all models, or do they target key models?
I think so. I think generally when a brand like Rolex does it, it's across the entire product line. I don't think that they tend to focus on particular units. They're also extremely good at managing their supply chain, where watches are, making sure that there's only a certain number of watches in each market, that if there is a change in currency or something that would cause a shift for people to flock to that market, that they're quickly scarce. And you saw this no better than London, where this was London's best year ever in terms of selling watches. The reason being is that the pound weakened against virtually every currency, and you had the world going to London to buy watches, but lo and behold, brands like Patek and Rolex were very quick to put the clamp down in those, in London having the best pieces, and they became scarce again even there.
Of course, and of course, when watches are cheap in any given area, that may help the regional dealers, but Rolex Geneva, again, because they are owned by a foundation, wants stability, predictability. They're the Fed, remember, guys?
Answering Thumper JDM, I don't believe that Rolex changing their price really will really change what other brands do. I think that it'll be a marginal increase. Not enough that you'll see a drastic shift, but just enough to make themselves happy and make their customers happy and the people that own the watch.
And is it accurate to say that on average a Rolex price increase comes during normal times every 18 to 24 months?
Roughly, yeah, and we're overdue at this point. Okay, moving on. Final topic of the night. I had the privilege of going to the release of the new Zenith Defy Lab. And presented here for you guys are 10 of the limited edition pieces that they created. This was the first time, from what I understand, that when a brand released a watch out to the press and to the market, for the launch that they also had the product ready to go for customers. These 10 watches here were pre-sold to customers from all over the world. They were flown in to Switzerland for the launch of the watch and to pick up the watch there in person.
And to be clear, those 10, that's all of them.
Correct.
Every single one.
Exactly. So all 10 were sold. The watch retailed for about $32,000 to $33,000. It was a new type of material. I'm going to have Tim tell you, I wish I had a video of it, I just don't, but I'll have Tim tell you a little bit about the movement because from what I understand, it's going to be one of the most drastic changes to watchmaking that's ever happened.
Yes, this technology is imported from Tag Heuer's ultra haute de gamme branch, led by a guy named Guy Simon, who is really more of an engineer than a watchmaker, and he's been with the company since the early 2000s. He got his start with the V4 and its belt-driven movement, trying to make that work. So here's the thing. What you're looking at has been sort of laying in the undergrowth since about 2012 when Dave Bethune first showed the Resonique system, which operated on the same principle. Then in 2015, we saw Vaucher manufactures Genacond regulator. The idea basically being that using synthetic silicon components, you can create a resonator that by taking a mechanical impetus, a spring-driven oscillation that drives this silicon piece at its natural frequency, you can then harness this high-frequency, low-amplitude oscillator, much in the way the Accutrons of the 60s and 70s harnessed a servo-style tuning fork. And it basically oscillates very little in terms of motion, but very much in terms of frequency.
It actually looks like it's beating. When you see the dial, it's almost like a beating heart.
It's an open dial, and you can see this piece oscillating at 15 hertz or 30 beats per second. It's you know, if you take an El Primero, 36,000 vibrations per hour, this is that times 3, 108,000. And because it has ultra low amplitude, it doesn't use a lot of energy, so it can have both incredible accuracy due to the frequency, 0.3 seconds a day, but it can also have a long power reserve because the amplitude is low and the energy used is low, so it can run for 72 hours.
And it requires no lubrication because of the silicon.
It also requires minimal watchmaker input. It's not complicated from a part standpoint. You can look at something like a Zeitwerk, and it's chugging along at 18,000 vibrations per hour. It's got 400 plus parts, a time bridge, jumping minutes, a remontoire. Here's the thing. This movement has 18 joules and only about as many parts as a Rolex Daytona chronograph, which means it's less complicated than virtually any standard caliber 400 El Primero in joules and parts.
Yeah, I mean,
this is a brave new world.
It was awesome, and I mean, I feel like it's as close to quartz as you're going to get. Yeah, next time they're going to say, like, we've got quartz, guys. But no, so what's actually great about this is I think that you're going to see this being one of the relaunches of Zenith. And, you know, price point wise on these was about $32,000, $33,000. But from what I'm understanding, when they launch this watch out to the general pop, I would say, in available models, it's going to be a $7,000 to $8,000 watch. And you've got the strap that's on there is the gummy croc that Hublot uses, so extremely high quality, wearable. You've got avant-garde materials, so I think that you definitely are going to feel that Hublot tag vibe, but you're going to have definitely the DNA of Zenith.
And we haven't even touched on the material of the case. It's a metallic foam called Aeronith, and it's 1.7 times lighter, get this, than aluminum. So, first of all, I'm amazed that there can be any water resistance in something that's basically a porous material, but it is water resistant to 50 meters. It is Hublot in its size, in its shape, and its open dial. Fortunately, it does have a lot of watchmaking integrity. Beneath the exhibitionism, there's also a lot of substance, but this brings us to the contradiction in tonight's show. We're looking at the divergence between Terry Stern's brand of high horology, which is anachronistic, hand-finished, slow, exclusive, traditional, and then we're looking at Jean-Claude Biver's version, which is increasingly automated, mechanistic, synthetic, scientific. And you'll pay a lot of money for both because they both cost a lot of money on the back end to prepare, but they are two divergent roads, and ultimately you have to choose one. You can have a hand-painted dial on this watch, but you can't have a hand-decorated, handmade movement of photo-etched silicon.
Exactly. No, and I think that again, I really think that you know, Zenith has a winner here. I think at the $7,000 to $8,000 price point, they're going to be selling a lot of these watches. I think that when you see the dial in action, go online, take a look at the video. It is truly a conversation piece. I mean, it looks like the watch is alive.
Did
it's
you
crazy.
Get to hear it? Did you get to hold it up to your ear?
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, I mean, again, it looks alive. So. Again, I think that it's going to do great, and I agree with other people in the chat. It will definitely be interesting to see what these watches do in the pre-owned space. But I think that if Zenith does it right and plays their cards right, and they keep these watches scarce, that you're going to see many people want them.
And I'll say this, guys, there's room for both in the world, and I think Zenith has them both in-house. If you saw the Georges Favre-Jacot Fusée, the commemorative for 150 years, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that, guys. So if you have that and you have this high-frequency oscillator in the same manufacturer, that's great for Zenith, and that's why it's one of our favorite manufacturers and our favorite brands.
Exactly. So, Tim, I think that's all that we have for today. I want to thank you guys all for logging on. I really appreciate it. Tim, I'm sure, really appreciates it. Again, please, I know that we always have the pitch, but please download our Watchbox app. It really means a lot. You guys have been awesome, and a lot of the critiques that we've made to the app and the tweaks have come right here from this channel. And please continue to give us your insight. Please download it. Please put in your collections, because our goal is to make the app better and better and better, and really just one day have every watch enthusiast have to have it on their phone.
Exactly, guys. Be our testers. Help us out. Make it better. Watchbox by Gothberg.
Thank you, guys. I'm Brian. This is Tim.
This is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.